Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming for another session of the lecture series in Baha'i Studies of the University of Haifa, Department of Middle Eastern History, and with the cooperation of the Ezri Center for the Iran and Persian Gulf Studies. I wish to thank first our lecturer today, Dr. Nazila Ghanea from Oxford University, who was actually, the idea of the lecture came from her and she volunteered to deliver it, so bravo for your initiation. And since we last year, was it? We got the book, so we're expecting another one. And also, I wish to thank Professor Nathan Lerner from the Interdisciplinary Center at the Ezri for agreeing to come, giving his consent to come and to be the discussant. I would just say that this year we have an exceptionally good series of lectures in Baha'i studies, and very interesting one. I mean, not that the others weren't interesting, but it just the combination of the three actually. Nazila's today lecture, as well as the next one will be on the 23rd of December, regarding Baha'i academic, shall we say, education in Iran, in the harsh conditions that they are actually living and operating in Iran. And on April there will be another lecture by Negar Motahedeh from the USA regarding Babi photography. So I think it will be a very interesting year we would have this year. Oh yes, Elham Afnan as well. Yes, I forgot it. Was it in May, right? May, yes, May. Well, regarding the Afnan, very important family, Baha'i family, which I'm very much looking to hear because of my dealings with that family in their commercial activities. Anyway, today's lecture, Baha'i Reflections on Defamation of Religions, by Dr. Nazila Ghanea. For those who haven't been here last year, and in order to update us with her very fast-forwarding activities, academic activities, Dr. Nazila Ghanea is a lecturer in international human rights law at the University of Oxford. She was previously MA convener at the Center for International Human Rights at the University of London. She is the editor of the international academic journal by Brill Publishers, Religion and Human Rights. Her research lies primarily in the areas of freedom of religion or belief, minority rights, the United Nations human rights machinery, and human rights in the Middle East. Her publications include the journal article Convergences and the Disparities between the Human Rights of Religious Minorities and of Women in the Middle East, which was published Human Rights Quarterly in 2004. A monograph, Human Rights, the United Nations and the Baha'is in Iran, which is this one. You can circulate it among you as long as it comes back here. It was published at The Hague by Culver Law in 2003. A book chapter on apostasy and freedom to change religion or belief. I'm going a little faster. And then the edited collections Minorities, People and Self-Determination in Leiden 2005, and the Challenges of Religious Discrimination at the Dawn of New Millennium, also in Leiden in 2003, and the journal article from United Nations Commission on Human Rights to United Nations Human Rights Council, One Step Forward or Two Step Sideways. It was published in ICLQ, which is International
Comparative
Law Quarterly, in 2006. So we are very much looking forward to hear your lecture, which will be Baha'i Reflections on Defamation of Religion. Please.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and privilege to be back here, and it's especially an honor to share a platform with Professor Lerner, even though I engineered it. Otherwise, I don't deserve to be on the same platform as him. But I had the good fortune of meeting him after years of reading his research 2 months ago in Geneva, and it's wonderful to see you again. We've caught them on a very busy day, so thank you, Professor Lerner and Mrs. Lerner, for being here. The topic that we are going to address today is Baha'i reflections on defamation of religions. I think it will probably be suitable to say that the term defamation of religions is not a Baha'i term. It's a term that is being used in UN human rights resolutions over the past 10 years. So what is the scope of defamation of religions? What is the impetus behind this 10-year record and continuing record of resolutions? What is it? We will be limiting ourselves to the framework that is being put forward in those resolutions. It might be odd to be discussing religious reflections on something that is of such recent pedigree and also which hasn't been defined very clearly, but there's a lot of political momentum and many implications from this series of resolutions. So I thought it would be useful to reflect on it this way. But secondly, and most importantly, the justification of these resolutions is that they are there to defend religion. And however, I have not seen any publications and I've not seen much discussion about what various religions or beliefs think about this resolution and its motivation and its goals. So I'm hoping that this will be the first of many religious reflections on this political agenda. Because if it's on the grounds of defending religion that this is being put forward, then why hasn't there been any forum or discussion about what religions themselves think about it and whether they feel that they need to be defended in this way? So, starting with what is this framework and what are the justifications behind this resolution? Well, historically, it's important to note that the draft resolution, the first draft resolution addressing this issue, was put forward in April 1999. And it was called Defamation of Islam. It was put forward by the Organization of Islamic Conference at the UN Commission on Human Rights. It wasn't received with much enthusiasm by the other states. It was withdrawn, and a couple of days later it was presented once again, and this time it had the title Defamation of Religions. Now in it, if you look at the preamble of that resolution, it talks about respect of all, harmony in all societies, the value of religious and cultural diversity, tolerance and freedom of religion and belief, concern about the negative stereotyping of religions and attacks on religious sites and symbols, and the prohibition of racist and xenophobic ideas. So taking it at the principled level, then matters of discrimination, intolerance, prejudice, holy sites, holy figures, religions are of course religious concerns. They have been religious concerns cast more generally. They have been religious concerns for time immemorial. So therefore, on the level of principle, it would seem very appropriate to also engage in some exploration about religious thoughts around this issue. So a very fertile field for the topic of discussion, it would seem. However, let's dig a little bit deeper regarding the wording of those resolutions. Now, I'm just taking 2 examples. The text of those resolutions in 2005 and then in 2008. Each of them give 8 or 9 illustrations or actual examples of defamation of religions. All of them refer to Islam and Muslim communities. There isn't one example from any other religious or belief community. So in 2005, for example, there is talk about Muslim minorities and communities in, it even says where, in some non-Muslim countries. So what about Muslim communities in Muslim countries that might be facing similar challenges? The negative projection of Islam in the media, attacks on Islam and Muslims, discrimination against Muslims, etc., profiling of Muslims, etc., etc. So I'm not talking about whether these human rights challenges exist in the world today. Of course they do. But of all the illustrations of this resolution that is called Defamation of Religions, every single example relates only to Islam. One of them I find particularly interesting, and this has been passed successfully at UN fora again and again in the past decade. It talks about defamation of Islam and Muslims, in particular in human rights forums. So you know, there is the challenge being put forward that in fact Islam is being profiled in the very human rights fora that are passing these resolutions. And the only concern here is, are we mixing up Muslim majority states or states that are ran allegedly, you know, on political grounds are ran according to Islam, or are we talking about Muslim populations? Because is there profiling of Muslim individuals in UN human rights fora, or is there criticism of certain Muslim countries and particular practices? There's a big difference between these two claims, but they're not spelt out in this resolution. In 2008, the resolution, this time at the Human Rights Council, because the Commission changed to the Council in 2006, talks about Islam and other divine religions. Now, we don't normally have the preface divine before religions in human rights law. In fact, in human rights instrument, there isn't any exclusive reference to religion. There's always reference to religion or belief. So that the question of whether a particular theological framework accepts another religion or not as divine doesn't become an issue, because everybody is entitled to freedom regarding their own conscience, whether it's religion or belief. And in human rights instruments, it's very clear that that belief includes atheism, includes secularism, it includes the right not to hold a religion or belief, as well as to continue or uphold a particular religion or belief. So the human rights framework, as enshrined over the past 60 years, has been much broader. But now we have this narrower language of religion, and now again, divine religions. So who is defining what is divine and isn't? That causes a problem in human rights terms. Now, it's not only this series of resolutions that have been following this path. There are at least 4 other sets of resolutions that have also been using similar language and might give rise to similar concerns. There is a World Conference Against Racism resolution. I think you may have heard about it, the 2001 Durban Conference. There are the resolutions that appoint and, you know, announce the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism. There's one on democracy, what is it called? Oh yes, the incompatibility between democracy and racism. These are all different resolutions adopted each year at the Human Rights Council and also at the UN General Assembly. And these have also started using either the terminology of defamation of religions or a new list: anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and Christianophobia. Now, to my knowledge, of course, there has been, you know, at least 6 years of reference to xenophobia and racism in UN human rights fora. Anti-Semitism has also had a long history of mention. In fact, it was one of the founding, if not the most important reason, then certainly one of the strongest reasons behind the creation of the United Nations. But it was in 2004 that now there is reference to anti-Semitism, Christianophobia, and Islamophobia. And it seems that the Vatican was also in favor of this. Now, again, this is not to deny at all that there are instances, and very serious instances, of violations against Jews, Muslims, and Christians around the world. But the question is, why are we singling out particular phobia, and what might the implications of that be? We should single them out if a case has been made for singling them out above and beyond religious discrimination, racism, and, you know, all the other instruments and machinery that we already have. If they are failing to deal effectively with anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and Christianophobia, and if it is lack of recognition that is leading to that failure, then let's single them out. If it is lack of political will or implementation, let's focus on implementation rather than creating new language that might be, actually crafting new political wars rather than actually improving the situation in human rights terms on the ground for the victims. So what I'm suggesting is that there is a wider series of events behind the defamation of religions resolutions. Now, it's not just that the Organization of Islamic Conference is sponsoring and putting forward these resolutions, but if you look at the Organization of Islamic Conference website, then it's very clear that in the Islamic Summit, in fact, the kings and rulers of the Islamic countries that are members of the OIC, it's been part of their decision making over the past few years to not only have defamation of religions on the agenda, but also to give it legal form. So at the moment, these are resolutions that are presented continuously, but it has already delivered certain impacts. The mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism has been very much targeted, shaped to give prior importance to the question of Islamophobia. There has been, within the United Nations, there's been an exploration under the name of duplication of standards, which again is emphasizing Islamophobia. But the OIC decision-making, if one goes to their final communique from Senegal in March 2008, is that legal shape should be given to this decision. So there should either be a new treaty on defamation of religions, or there should be a new optional protocol to the Race Convention that singles out the problem of Islamophobia and defamation of religions. Now, in all of these, I observe that there is very little mention of victims. So what the resolutions defend, for example, is holy figures. And it's not that I have no respect for holy figures or that one shouldn't encourage respect for cautious speech in the media that leads to that either directly or indirectly leads to bloodshed and loss of life around the world. Certainly that should be a concern of governments around the world. But within the UN human rights machinery, it seems a little bit difficult to defend the rights, for example, of the Prophet Muhammad, because he's not alive, and we have not had clarity about how human rights can defend the rights of those that are no longer alive. What the UN human rights machinery normally does is defend the rights of primarily individuals, to some extent groups as well, but those that are alive now. So it needs to be traced down to the victims to give it relevance and to connect it, make it relevant to the UN human rights machinery. So the defense of holy sites and holy personages seems a little bit abstract and a poor fit with the UN human rights standards and machinery. So the rationale is allegedly protection of religion. So, these are sort of the difficulties around the definition, the scope, the implications, and the political strategies behind it. But let's take it at its own words in the preface when it talks about religious discrimination and the rights of all religions and countering intolerance. Let's take it back to the level of principle and see what just one religion or belief, and I'm going to focus on the Baha'i faith because I understand its teachings most, what a religion might reflect on the principle behind the stated objective behind this resolution. What I want to suggest is that if we take the view of any religion or belief, its views on free speech, the limits of free speech, dignity in talking about religions or beliefs, are on many layers. They are complex, they are rich, they can be read at many different levels, and the legal criminal punishments that should stem from any infringements are not at all clear. The problem with the political framework of defamation of religions, as one special rapporteur put it off record, is that the special rapporteur said in a meeting that she went up to one of the governments that are putting forward this resolution and said, well, what are the limits of the power of the state? First of all, the state is determining what is religion, then they're determining what is divine religion, then they're deciding on who are the victims, and there is no limitation given in the resolutions as to what the punishment will be for those who offend religion. And that just seems to be too problematic. Are we saying that whenever a state decides that you have infringed defamation of religion, that you will be executed without, there is no protection in that framework that it must be determined by law, it must already be established by law, it must be an independent judiciary, that we mustn't already jump to criminal punishments before exploring other avenues, etc., etc. The normal frameworks for rule of law and protection are not at all determined. We just have this hazy concept that could just embolden and empower states that already have quite problematic human rights records. I think all states have problematic human rights records, but some greater than others. Okay, so however, when we take a religious perspective on the matter, the nuances, the complexity, the richness, the framework is much richer and on many more levels than this resolution has possibly done justice to so far. Now, first of all, when we're talking about the Baha'i writings on this matter, the broader context is that the Baha'i writings are focused on improving harmony and unity in the world. So one of the writings say, "O my friend, in all circumstances one should seize upon every means which will promote security and tranquility among the peoples of the world." It goes on, "In this glorious day, whatever will purge you from corruption and will lead you towards peace and composure is indeed the straight path." Another one of the writings say that one should strive with utmost endeavor to quench the fire of animosity and hatred which burneth fiercely in the hearts of the peoples of the earth. So the backdrop to the question of free speech, its limits, hatred, and how to counter it, is the fact that the Baha'i faith is dedicated to promoting tranquility, composure, and quenching animosity and hatred. In order to give direction to the writings, which are indeed very on many levels and address many different issues, I've called them those that address primarily the individual and the private sphere, and then secondly I'll go on to those that seem to focus more on society at large, and these are just my classifications of them. One of the writings that I think is very tangible is the one that talks about how we should be careful, have in mind, be cognizant of our audience when we address them. And it uses the example of baby milk to convey the importance of this. And I note that there's a lot of research about the fortifying powers of baby milk and how breast milk is stronger, and IQ, physical development, even the composure and psychology of the child the research suggests can be very strongly influenced by baby milk. So I think it's a very vivid research. It's sort of giving more life even to this writing. Here, Baha'u'llah says, "Every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place. For the impression which every word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible." And later on he says, "An enlightened man of wisdom should primarily speak with words as mild as milk, that the children of men may be nurtured and edified thereby, and may attain the ultimate goal of human existence, which is the station of true understanding and nobility." So anybody who is enlightened should speak with words as mild as milk. Why? So that the children might become edified and achieve the goal of human existence, which is knowledge and nobility. The piece goes on to say, One word is like unto springtime, causing the tender saplings of the rose garden of knowledge to become verdant and flourishing, while another word is even as deadly poison. And it talks about the sweetness of words. So words can be sweet, edifying, they can be foundational to development, as the baby milk example shows us. It can be core psychologically, physically, emotionally, in every sense. But on the other hand, it can be like poison. And, you know, if one looks at the instances of, you know, violence around the world that has been caused, for example, by the film, caused directly or indirectly, I'll leave that question open, but caused by, you know, the cartoon issue, the Fetsna film, the killing of Van Gogh, really they are like poison in society in that they mobilize hatred and animosity and set up, you know, conflict around the world. The baby milk example also reminds us that, you know, if you give a baby food that the baby is not ready for, then the baby will let you know about it. Unfortunately, in society, you know, we don't get immediate examples like that. So one's words might be poisonous, but it takes a long time for one to realize, and those words cannot be withdrawn. So again, if you feed a child something unsuitable, it could have devastating consequences, and it can never be withdrawn. You just have to let it work through the system, I guess. That's probably too vivid for you. You've got a small baby. The Baha'i writings also emphasize, however, free will. But they caution us to be fair in exercising our free will. There is also one piece in Baha'i writings that talks about being fair in judging divine persons and religion. So the Baha'i writings even talk about the phenomenon of the media, and, you know, in fact the Times was mentioned in one of the writings, but that's probably because of the time in which that writing was expressed. But it talks about the importance of the media and the role of journalists. I'll move on. I'm on page 10 if you have the paper, but I'll move on to the end of that quotation where it says, the writers, the journalists, should be purged from the promptings of evil passions and desires, and to be attired with the raiment of justice and equity. They should inquire into situations as much as possible and ascertain the facts, then set them down in writing. Now, I haven't been to journalism school, but I'm not sure that the terms justice and equity, that you bear the raiment of justice and equity, is really on the syllabus. But, you know, it should be. Another of the writings talks about newspapers as the mirrors of the world. You know, the rest of the world is dependent in a large way to be informed of what's happening in the world. Our whole knowledge of where the world is headed is critically informed by journalists. So the raiment of equity and justice is probably not too high a price to put on it. So it talks about, because of how significant the media is in shaping our opinion of each other and the future, it puts the burden on journalists to ascertain the facts, to explore the situation as much as possible. Now, I'm afraid that the media is informed by deadlines and immediacy and sales much more than, maybe I'm being a bit unfair, but, you know, be it that those pressures exist, the fairness, one can still be honest in the writing and say, these are my sources, to the extent that I have been able to find out, this is my conclusion, but not to make allegations that are completely unfounded or dependent on one or two dodgy sources. And, you know, this is very strongly connected to the defamation of religion and insult of religious figures, etc., because the media is the propelling engine here. There's also one curious part in the writings that talks about there being a special duty of fairness when one is judging other religions. Weigh it with the just balance that ye possess, the balance of the testimony of the prophets and messengers of God. But one should also look at the context to see in what context this is being stated. To the individual, the Baha'i writings place the emphasis for individual search for truth and coming to one's own conclusion about matters of religion or belief. Now, Baha'is believe that to accept the Prophet of God in his time and to abide by his bidding are the two essential, inseparable duties which each soul was created to fulfill. They go on, one exercises these twin duties by one's own choice, an act constituting the highest expression of the free will with which every human being has been endowed by an all-loving creator. That's actually from the Universal House of Justice. So we need an environment of open debate, of discussion, of knowledge of other belief systems. If this is a duty that Baha'is recognize for each individual, then each individual needs to have access to different beliefs and approaches to matters of truth in order to exercise that duty in an informed and conscious way. Now, moving on to the writings that tend to put the emphasis much more on the public sphere, there's a new concept that I haven't come across elsewhere, and it's the concept of moderation in liberty. Have I missed any philosophers or figures that talk about that? Please let me know. But moderation in liberty is one thing that one can discern from the Baha'i writings. The Baha'i writings say, whatsoever passeth beyond the limits of moderation will cease to exert a beneficial influence. Consider, for instance, such things as liberty, civilization, and the like. However much men of understanding may favorably regard them, they will, if carried to excess, exercise a pernicious influence upon man. So civilization is a good thing, liberty is a good thing, but the Baha'i writings are saying that even if civilization or liberty, are excessive or pass beyond the limits of moderation, then it will have a negative influence. So from all of this, we see a lot of emphasis on free expression, on search for truth, and that duty resting not on the community, but on the individual themselves. One of the duties that the all-loving Creator has given the individual is to be able to search out truth. The context of that has to be free expression and liberty, but the Baha'i writings caution about they appeal to the individual to be moderate in his or her speech, to be cognizant of the audience. Otherwise, they tell the speaker, your words will not educate, will not edify, and will have a negative influence. And although the context of liberty and openness is recognized, there's also recognition that liberty might exceed a framework which will be beneficial for humanity as a whole. Another idea that I think is relevant to the debate about defamation of religions is not only that we should counter religious prejudice, but that there is such a thing as religious fanaticism. And this is not a very politically correct thing to discuss. And in the UN, there aren't debates about religious fanaticism. But the Baha'i writings say religious fanaticism and hatred are a world-devouring fire whose violence none can quench. So whilst we should seek as individuals not to offend another, I would suggest that the defamation of religion has become a little bit too obsessed with offense. And offense, by definition, is always subjective, and therefore, how can we legally respond legally respond full stop, let alone in human rights terms, to offense? What I might say to you, you might find a compliment, and you might be offended by. So it doesn't give us a very tangible measure, especially when you put that on a world level. How can we have a global measure of offense and use that as the boundary? However, it's obvious that in the defamation of religions debate, it is the state that is deciding when you as an individual or community have been offended, and the state itself is then exercising the punishment, and it just seems to be pulled too much in a state-centric way, and it's not giving the context that religious fanaticism might in fact be feeding into it, and that politicians might be maximizing benefit from all of this. So, you know, when there is a cartoon offense in one country and there are protests 9 months later in another country, you know, one has the right to be a little bit cautious about what really propelled that mass protest. It doesn't seem to be knee-jerk when it is such a long time subsequent to it. So the Baha'i position, definitely, if, you know, what is the Baha'i position on this new defamation of religions agenda? Definitely any Baha'i position on the matter will have to be informed by universality. The whole Baha'i ethos, in fact, links belief in one God with belief that religions are essentially one. There is writing after writing that, you know, insulting one of the messengers of God should be considered an insult to all of them. Rejecting one of the messengers of God should be considered a rejection of all of them. So Baha'is are monotheistic, and they believe that monotheism in essence will also mean recognition of the essential oneness of the religions that God has sent to humanity through the ages. Okay, now this is on the more theoretical angle, and I'll try to end soon so that we can
take your time. Your lecture.
But this is sort of from the writings themselves, but I'll just draw from one example of how the Baha'i community has responded to what could be called defamation of the Baha'i faith in Iran. In fact, since the defamation language became so impermeated within UN language, the Baha'i international community did use the term defamation against the Baha'i faith in one of the BIC, Baha'i International Community statements at the United Nations. I don't think it's the preferred term of Baha'is, but since that is, you know, the new language of the UN, then it was used. Now, you know better than me that not only has the Baha'i faith been misrepresented in Iran over the past 30 years, but one could say from its very inception in Iran. And what is important is that whatever allegations have been engineered and crafted against the Baha'is, many of which are contradictory, the insults are contradictory amongst themselves, but whenever these insults have been engineered and projected at the Baha'i community, the Baha'is have never been able to put across their side of the story. So whilst the Baha'i international community at the United Nations has very vigorously defended the rights of the Baha'is in Iran, and their rights purely to be recognized as equal citizens to all other Iranians, yet and there has been in the past, especially 2 or 3 years, an escalation of accusations against the Baha'i community, especially those that are put forward by the Persian Kayhan newspaper. What the BIC has asked for in response to these very dangerous accusations is that the Baha'i community of Iran have the right of reply. Okay, so beyond we are offended, you destroyed our historic site, you destroyed our holy places, you are obliterating every trace of our civilization in that country, the Baha'i international community has said, these are the allegations made against us. We want to respond in those same papers to those allegations. So on one level, that itself can be a very strong response to defamation of religions and a very immediate response, and it's the one that Baha'is have claimed for themselves unsuccessfully in Iran. Okay, one other conclusion I want to draw from the Baha'i writings about the broader theme of freedom of speech and caution in speech is that because the Baha'i writings put such an emphasis on individual search for truth, then Baha'is may want to err on the side of caution on matters to do with debate about belief, about religion or belief. it was a lively discussion 2 months ago at the UN, and it's no doubt it will continue and escalate. But the question was raised about, should we be more cautious about race speech or religious speech? Okay? And how do the two compare? On principle, of course, people should be defended from discrimination on both grounds, and there shouldn't be a hierarchy. But in actual fact, what about religious incitement? How do we respond to it? Here, I think it's very important to distinguish between the difference between race and religion is on many levels. But one of the differences, if you do not allow discussion about the principles of a religion, the teachings of a religion, then you are making all religion or belief discussion taboo. So if I want to ask, well, did Jesus really rise? Did the Prophet Muhammad really believe in the equality of women? If it's offensive to ask those questions, then one can hardly even begin on a journey of exploration about whether they want to become a Muslim or not. Okay? So I think since the Baha'i writings put such an emphasis on individual search for truth, then a Baha'i response to the defamation of religions would definitely be that there should be as open and free a space as possible to discuss matters of religion or belief. If we are too sensitive about discussions to do with religious principles, then we are not allowing space for either the believers of that religion or others who might want to join that religion to go through their difficult questions. So it might not be, it's therefore unsurprising to note that many of the governments that are strongly behind the defamation of religions mechanism and resolution are also those that do not allow change of religion or belief. And very, very tangibly, when it was in discussion, when it was being suggested that, okay, if we're going to have defamation of religions as a convention or as a protocol to the Convention on Race Discrimination, then you are giving the Ahmadiyya of Pakistan, the Baha'is in Iran, the Christians in Saudi Arabia, the Shia of Saudi Arabia and Malaysia, you are giving them the right also to pursue their right through the defamation agenda. However, the cautious language of divine religions might be precisely the limiting mechanism there. Okay, so I think I'll stop there and just observe that there are many human rights and political concerns around defamation of religions debate, that this debate is only escalating and permeating different agenda items in the UN human rights machinery, but with its spread, along with that spread is not coming further definition or clarity as to the limits of the punishments or the framework in which adjudication would be carried out or who defines offense. So it's not becoming any clearer, but it is spreading much further. Behind all of these moves is an agenda of legalizing it, making it enshrined in law, and the justification for it is that religion should be defended. My suggestion and exploration today was that if it is religion that is being defended, then let's ask a variety of religions or beliefs what they think about it, whether they think they need defending, and whether this is the best mechanism through which to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghanea. Our discussant today is Professor Nathan Lerner. Born in Poland and educated in Argentina, he obtained his law degree in 1950 and his doctorate in law and social sciences in 1958, both from Buenos Aires University. He was a practicing lawyer in Buenos Aires until 1963, when he settled in New York and worked as one of the representatives of the World Jewish Congress at the United Nations. In Israel since 1966, He was director of the Israeli branch of the World Jewish Congress until 1983. From 1984 to 1989, was director of International Center for the University Teaching of Jewish Civilization. Simultaneously, he taught international law and human rights at the university level. Since 1989, his main activity is university teaching. Since his retirement from Tel Aviv University, after more than 20 years of teaching, Professor Lerner teaches at the Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya. His main course is international law, and he also conducts seminaries on, among other subjects, state and religion, racial discrimination, minorities, and genocide. He lectures frequently abroad, is on the experts list of international organizations, and was consultant to the UNESCO on racial discrimination. Professor Lerner is the author of the following books in English: Religion, Secular Beliefs and Human Rights, Leiden 2006, Religion, Beliefs and International Human Rights, New York 2000, Group Rights and Discrimination in International Law, The Hague 2003, the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination in 1980, and the Crime of Incitement to Group Hatred in 1965. He also published several books in Spanish. His books on racial discrimination and on religion were translated into Japanese, and the one on group rights into Spanish. He's the author of many articles in Spanish, English, and Hebrew, published in books and journals of Israel, the United States, Spain, Argentina, and other countries. The floor is yours.
Why is that retirement?
Why? But
Define retirement.
you don't see it on my face. We have a limit of age in this university.
Retirement from the Tel Aviv University.
Yeah.
I don't know how Haifa. By the way, I am very pleased to be at this meeting at Haifa University. My first teaching in Israel was done at this university. But
Welcome home.
Well,
Welcome home.
Thank you very much. But I dropped out because every Tuesday when I used to come by car from Tel Aviv to Haifa, it was raining. And I decided that this is too much already for me, and I
So
gave
you
it
should
up.
come every day now.
Well, unless you promise a weather which is better than the one of today.
No, we want the rain. That's why I'm saying.
Okay, after I said that, I would also like to say that I'm very pleased to be here at Dr. Ghanea's lecture. We don't know each other personally for a long time. We have met a couple of months ago in Geneva, and I believe there is a lot of chemistry concerning ideas and viewpoints, and we agree on a lot of things, very small dissents. Dr. Ghanea said that she engineered my participation in this meeting. I believe it was a mistake, because if you wanted a discussant, I am the wrong man for that. In the best of the cases, I am a supporter, but it is difficult for me to be a discussant. Still, let me make a few points. First of all, my participation is not going to be a Jewish reply to a Baha'i reflection. I am a secular Jew. I am not an expert on comparative religion. I don't believe that what brought us together was the proximity between the Baha'i religion and the Jewish religion, which I don't know where it starts and where it finishes. It was a common belief in human rights, a common interest in asserting the right of each society to be a democratic society, and to have each part of the population respected in its feelings and its beliefs and its behavior and its way of life, etc., etc., etc. So I am not the best candidate to discuss with you. In addition to that, and speaking as a Jew, I believe we are both in the same boat. We both belong to persecuted communities. We both belong to communities that have been the victim of defamation. I will a little bit later speak about the question of defamation. So I believe this is also a joint element which is perhaps more important than the theological proximity or distance between both communities. I agree with you 100% that the subject is strongly politically charged. You say in your paper, absolutely rightly, that it started with an issue related to Islam, and quickly it was widened in order to become a more general topic. I don't know if bona fide or without good faith. Probably without good faith, because if you go through the wording that was utilized by the proposals of special legislation on defamation of religions, you will see that it is strongly politically inspired. There is no really a real interest in human rights. There is no real interest in democracy or in defending the honor and the pride and the good name of a religion. It's a way to putting a little bit higher the interest of a given community, world community, strongly supported by a good number of states. I believe that everyone who is an observer of the United Nations reality knows to what extent it is easy for any Islamic or Muslim proposal to get the majority in the General Assembly. It's very easy. They have a lot to buy, and they have a lot of means to buy to convince others to support their view. So it is not surprising that they started this offensive, which some thought that will reach in 2 months ago in Geneva a high point, and will permit to invoke the name of a group of so-called experts to strengthen the arguments in favor of special legislation on group defamation. It was not so. Fortunately, and I believe this is a remark that we both will certainly share, during the October meeting in Geneva, it was very soon easy to understand that the spokesman for the Muslim viewpoint, that they wanted special legislation for defamation of religions or defamation of Islam, they just retreated. They abandoned their fight for that. And they adopted the view, which I share absolutely, that it is preferably to use a more general system of defense of attacked religious or other communities, and that the singling out of a special legislation in the case of the Muslims was self-defeating, and I think that they abandoned it. I'm not sure about it. Maybe the General Assembly, the situation will be completely different. I don't know if Nazila was so surprised as I was. It was supposed to be a meeting of 11 people. It became a huge conference of 200 or more, maybe 300 people. 300 people registered to come. And among them, the representatives of several Muslim states. And this opened a chain of, an uninterrupted chain of requests for admission of representatives of other countries also. So it became a little General Assembly in Geneva, and I believe that the 11 people that were supposed to be the spokesmen really were just a minority, and they had no the possibility to express too much. Now, as I said, I don't believe that there is good faith in the attempt to legislate on defamation of religions. Still, to be honest, I have no strong feelings against the need or the convenience of trying to put some limitations on the attacks upon religions. But my starting point is a more general one. I believe that each collective identifiable group has the right to protect its honor, its good name, its traditions, its history, and to prevent and even to stop every attempt to defamate the group. Now, in one of my books, I've written about that under the heading of group rival. Now, it's a very difficult subject, I agree on that. First of all, what is precisely a group? Are we talking only about religious, ethnic, linguistic groups, or are we talking a little bit wider than that? What about homosexuals? What about other groups that are claiming that they are entitled to protection by the law against affront, against attacks, against defamation? Secondly, there is no way to determine who has the right to speak in the name of the group, who has the locus standi to address a court and tell these people are saying that all the Jews are I don't know what are money falsificators. How do you say falsificators? Yes.
Changers or
No,
money
changes
seekers.
is all right. Changes is all right. It's a profession, but I'm speaking.
Reading people. Or
Okay,
greedy people.
they greedy or whatever it was, or they are saying that all the Indians, the American Indians, are drunkards, or are saying that all the black people are violators of children and women. Now, these sayings should cause some mechanism to avoid it and to prevent it, and even in some cases to punish it. Of course, there is the question who represents the group. Well, if I say that Moshe Cohen is a drunkard and a violator and whatever else, Moshe Cohen has a right to address himself to the court and get protection. But if one says that all the Jews or all the Israelis are bad and are doing bad things, can one single Israeli come up and say, I am being attacked in my honor, in my dignity, and so on? So it's a difficult job, a difficult question, that question of group rival. Most legislations have tried to find some way in the middle to deal with it. For instance, in this country, you need the agreement of the Attorney General in order to be able to produce a libel for attacking a group. In some other countries it's easier, in some other countries it's completely impossible. So there are difficulties with that question of group defamation. And certainly much more are the difficulties with regard to defamation of religions. First of all, we have to find some agreement among people about what is a religion. So right, everyone will say that Christians, Baha'i, Jews, and Muslims are religions.
Not everybody would say Baha'i.
But there are many, many will say. But there are many others. What about the so-called sects? Which sect is entitled to protection of its ideas because it feels its canons insulted or attacked for someone else for any reason? I fully agree with what Dr. Ghanea said about how do you protect a person who doesn't exist anymore from the viewpoint of human rights. You have to protect it from the viewpoint of historical correction. Here there may be, if I may make a short digression, there is the question of attacks upon the Jewish people on the basis of the denial of Holocaust. Now, some people will say denial of Holocaust is a legitimate possibility for someone who wants to investigate or research the truth about the Nazi crimes. And he can reach one conclusion, can reach a different conclusion. But the question behind this is that those who go around with the false histories about the inexistence or the less gravity of the Holocaust are people who want to blame the Jewish people for something. They want to create a new wave of anti-Semitism. So you have to investigate the potential consequences of such an activity, and also to inquire about the intentions of the one who disseminates those. So it's a difficult problem. I'm against, I'm in good company, against the question of creating a new crime or a new institution which is to be called defamation of religions, but I believe that some ways should be investigated to deal with that question of group defamation. Groups are entitled to protection in the same way that an individual is entitled to protection of his good name and of his honor and his dignity. So it's a difficult matter, but it is a matter. In that respect, it is wrong to ask it only for Muslims. It's wrong to ask it only for religions. It has to be also requested for cultural groups, for ethnic groups, and so on and so on and so on. Another small dissenting point between me and Nazila is that I'm much more extreme than she is. She belongs to a very mild and moderate group. I know what the Baha'is are, and I know how to be. I am not Baha'i, and I'm entitled to some extremism and to some roughness. And I am more extremist than she is with regard to the possibility and the necessity to penalizing hate speech. If it is racial hate speech, if it is religious hate speech, if it is cultural or linguistic hate speech. And I am not against, on the contrary, I am in favor of utilizing criminal law to stop it. I know that it is a delicate matter, I know that it can be misused, but to my mind, and here I'm speaking as a Jew who has an, how should I put it, an historical wound, which is as a consequence of the Second World War. You must be severe in the action against hate speech. I believe that even the United States, which is veneration for freedom of speech even beyond the reasonable limits, they are opening now to the idea that hate speech has to be stopped. They are enhancing punishment when a crime is committed because of a racial or religious motivation or reason, and this is the correct road. That is the way it should be dealt with. That's the reason why I've always advocated. I've advocated with regard to the Convention on Racial Discrimination, where it is easy, because there is an article which Nazila quoted, Article 4, which permits it, and I'm advocating it in relation with every kind of speech which is emanating from a feeling of hatred against a single community, against a single group, or whatever it is. So in this respect, I beg your absolution.
No, you're correct.
And I am defending my extremism in this respect. Except for these two small different viewpoints, I fully agree with your paper. I'm unable to comment on the second part of the paper regarding Baha'i, because I'm not good with regard to comparative religions. It's not my field. I don't know a lot about it. I believe that we have a clearly joint interest and viewpoint and angle as members of two groups that know what persecution is because of belonging to a group. And in that respect, it was a pleasure for me to come here to listen to you again. I hope it will be additional opportunities. I cannot do anything about it, but I cannot forgive that she comes to Israel and doesn't go to Tel Aviv. It's not normal.
Maybe it's defamatory.
We are monopolistic here.
You may be monopolistic, but there is only one city in Israel, and this is Tel Aviv. So please.
There's only one university.
So I hope this will be corrected in future
Sorry if I've
visits.
offended you.
And I also hope that what we have done together in Geneva will found some sort of public expression, either by, as you suggested, a joint paper or whatever it is, or perhaps by the report that it was promised to us that it will be coming out. I believe that it was an interesting departure from United Nations one-sidedness. It was a good experience of listening to different people, and really there were different people of different viewpoints Although I believe you also felt it, there was a majority of Western approach, I would say. I didn't see too many Asians. There was only one African, I believe. No, two Africans. There was only one Latin American coming from Guatemala, which is certainly not so representative. So this can be improved. But in any case, it was very good that we had an opportunity to meet and to repeat the encounter here in Haifa. Thank you.
Thanks very much for both participants, Dr. Nazila Ghanea and Professor Matan Lerner. And questions, please. Yes, Dr. Mahmoudi.
Professor Lerner, I really appreciated your comments about penalizing hate speech, because it seems to be, rather than diminishing, with the world becoming more interdependent, if you will, that it's increasing. And I wondered if you could, and I know that if there isn't some form of law that can contain this behavior, if you will, which I think has far-reaching ramifications, and I think Europe and Germany was one example that is still being explored to understand better, the consequences of what happened. But my question is, you mentioned that the U.S. is moving in this direction. I just wondered if you could comment just some more about that, and are there any other countries, especially in Europe, which has a history of what hate speech has led to? Beyond the U.S., where else can we look to?
Should I reply to that?
Sure.
Well,
That's what would you like?
it's important because, first of all, in Europe, almost every European country member of the European Union has anti-hate speech legislation. This became a fact after the adoption of the Convention on Racial Discrimination, and some of the European countries which have been guilty of inhumane regimes like fascism in Italy and Germany and Nazism in Germany were the first one to articulate anti-extremist laws which punish hate speech, and I believe it is very good legislation. It should be followed by every country. We have a little bit of that in this country. As to the United States, they were sticking very firmly to the idea that freedom of speech is sacred, that the free market should be the place where all ideas are discussed freely and responded to by other ideas, and the light and the truth will come out from that discussion. But I believe that in the last, 20 years, 10 years, I don't know, the legislation against hate speech has been adopted in several states of the United States and also at the federal level, and the policy of enhancing punishment for crimes committed because of motivation, of racist or religious motivation, is a fact. So almost every American court is punishing more a crime committed by a racist reason or religious reason than just a crime committed because of economic reasons. Someone wanted to rob another one, and so on and so on. So I believe this is the trend. Now, it has some dangers, I cannot deny it. It requires democratic societies. It requires a real freedom of speech. It requires respect among the different groups composing a nation. But I believe this is the trend, and I'm particularly very firm on that demand of using the criminal law. I'm a firm believer that the main instrument is always education, but when the law says that something is punishable, it's a tremendous educational instrument. If one knows that something that he does or he says is going to be punished, then it is educational, and it may stop some abuses and some mistakes.
Could I just add one note?
Sure.
That what I wanted to I'm certainly not sort of projecting to the future to say there will never be a Baha'i position on hate speech. I'm sure there will be. What I was trying to say is that within the defamation of religions framework, if you are including debate about religious teachings and beliefs within that framework, that's a very narrow and cautious ground. And I would think that the Baha'i platform would want to encourage well, at least allow the individual full exploration on matters of religion or belief, but that doesn't mean it wants to encourage offense. On the matter of hate speech and genocide prevention, absolutely there should be laws on that, and I'm sure, you know, if Baha'is were asked to comment on that, they would also agree with that, but certainly not in a unilateral way. It should be a general law, and a law that has a hierarchy built within it that can be manipulated is counterintuitive and counterproductive from any religious perspective, I would guess.
I fully agree with you. But don't forget that we had the most cases that we had in this respect also in this country to some extent, where some expressions of abusive freedom of speech which deeply offended not only Muslims and Muhammad, but Christians and the memory of Jesus Christ, and Jews are frequently subjected to such abuses in the press of some countries. So this is the point. I agree with you that you said somewhere speaking about my paper, I believe in your paper, that I was cautious. I am cautious. I don't want to exaggerate. We don't have to exaggerate, but we don't have to open the road to do people whatever they want and to say whatever they want. If they say something that is likely to engender harm, real harm to another group, it has to be stopped.
That's a definition. I think in Israel, if I remember correctly, the hate that's on the same subject.
There was
Hate speech on its own is not an offense unless it incites to perform a crime. So there is a difference.
This is the idea of incitement. And this is the idea of Article 4. Article 4 of the Racial Convention speaks about incitement to.
Yeah.
So it's not just a theoretical argumentation. If one says, I don't like the Christian religion because there is no such a thing as a Trinity, and you are joking, what it does, that the Virgin had a child, it makes no sense. So this may be legitimate unless it is done with the intention to stimulate a real action against a Christian minority in a non-Christian country. Usually in a Christian country they wouldn't care too much if it is a democratic country.
In Ireland they had to fight.
Well, Ireland is a very particular case.
Professor Gilbar.
Can you please give us a couple of examples of judicial definitions of hate speech?
Definitions of hate speech?
Yes.
Oh yes, you have here Article 4?
Judicial.
Yes.
Page 15 has a definition, but by an academic.
Yeah, that have been adopted by states.
There are numerous judicial decisions. I cannot cite them by heart, but there are many. In the United States, in England, in France, in Italy, in Germany, and in Israel.
What's how do you differentiate between the two, between defamation of religion and hate speech? Because when you defamate a religion,
I don't like
usually out of hatred. So
it's a very good observation. I don't like that question of defamation of religions.
Yeah.
I personally have used the figure of group libel.
Okay.
Group libel, which is libel, mainly it is offensive, it is harmful, and it is against a whole group, not against an individual person. And then the legislation of a real democratic country should provide the group with the possibility to act against that.
Or any members of the group, actually.
Well, any members of the group. A group is composed by individuals, so
yes.
Unless there is a representative institution of a group, but in some cases there are, I would say that if there is an attack on the Christian religion which is likely to engender violence against Christians, I believe the Christian community in a non-Christian country is entitled to go to the courts and say, stop it.
But even without representative, if I'm as a Christian, for example,
I
want to protest, but somebody else from that community doesn't want to
I'm
protest.
in favor of an individual right to take the stand and go to the courts.
Yeah.
But it's not very popular in many countries. They are afraid of multiplication of approaches to the court and so on. That's the reason in Israel we ask for the agreement of the general attorney to produce. But I believe it is necessary, and maybe this is also the reply to the Islam, to the Muslim intention to have a particular legislation for them, which is absolutely wrong.
I think it gives us a clue that defamation of religions is being introduced as a new concept because the frameworks, the limitations, the judicial record will not apply to this new concept. And therefore, that's what makes it risky, is that we can't link it to Canadian legislation and French legislation because it's a new concept. In some ways it relates to hate speech, but in many ways it's much looser than hate speech. Therefore, unleashing a whole new concept whose parameters are not clear and making this into human rights law not only gives it human rights credence and stamp of approval, but unleashes a whole range of risks that we're completely uninformed about.
I fully agree.
But if you come out of the the fact that democracy is equality of race, religion, color, and things like that, religion among these things, and if somebody tells you you are a Negro or you're black or something like that, and that's a very strong case to go to court. Why not religion? I mean, you have to come out of this very basic democratic principle to learn from it, also to apply it also to the case of religion, I think.
You see, but the defamation or the insult is never of telling to a Negro that he's a Negro, or never telling to an Indian that he's an Indian, or to telling a Jew that he's a Jew. It is when you add an adjective to that word. You are a dirty Jew, you're a drunken Indian, you are a violator of women when you are a black man. That's the
yes,
danger.
of course.
There's
Yes.
to be a defamation of the...
Of course,
order.
it's happening beyond the physical fact.
I think the principle that I footnoted regarding Professor Lerner, the principle that religious hatred should not be any easier to manipulate than racial hatred is legitimate and should be explored carefully and cautiously in a universal way.
Absolutely.
But with, does the OIC really want a law that will allow Shias in Malaysia to go and say, why are we registered as a deviant sect in this country, or Shias in Saudi Arabia to go and complain through an independent judiciary why they are considered polytheist and sects, etc., or Ahmadiyya in Pakistan that are not allowed to call,
Or Scientologists in Germany.
or Scientology. Well, I was talking about the OIC. They might not want to encourage that platform, but that platform should be open to all that are being insulted. There are groups that cannot call themselves Muslim in Muslim countries.
Would you say that Baha'i is one of those groups? No.
No.
Professor
No.
Gilbar.
There's the point of departure where I'm not sure that I can agree with you. You said that human rights relate only to living people. But now you see, if I'm a Muslim and you attack Muhammad, saying that he was drunken, that he was a mad person, etc., etc., and I deeply believe in Muhammad, you don't attack Muhammad, you attack me,
Yeah.
you offend me. The same as you do with to Baha'u'llah and to Moses and to Jesus Christ. So the point is here that once you attack someone that I deeply believe in,
Yeah.
the attack is on a living person. And therefore here I'm not sure that your distinction is so
Yeah.
clear.
No, I think
United Nations distinction.
No, what you said.
No. It was just a general observation. Is that it's putting emphasis on the insult to the holy person. I think that's legitimate, but it should link it to individuals alive today and how they will be hurt by it. The fact that the Prophet Muhammad is called a terrorist certainly can lead to the risk that every Muslim in society today will be accused of being terrorists and therefore will be attacked, and violence or other harm will become upon Muslims. So it needs to be traced to today's victims.
Is it enough that I say that he is my prophet, he is the father of my religion, that's it?
Yes,
Isn't
but
it
the
enough?
defamation resolution leaves it at that level, I think the linking and the illustration of victims today brings life to it and makes it relevant. Yeah, I don't think we disagree, but I expressed myself too generally.
It's both.
But you are protecting the Muslim today that has been hurt. You're not protecting the Prophet Muhammad per se.
No.
Right.
What happens in Iran now, for example, if someone defames Baha'u'llah?
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
More newspaper articles come out.
It's even worse. The country is doing this. The country is doing this.
But in fact, it's not the supreme leader that is. The supreme leader is not only offending Baha'u'llah. He is also directly linking it to Baha'is today. That the Prophet, their Prophet instructed them to kill Muslims. So that creates an immediate risk for all Baha'is living in Iran today.
Yes,
I'm sorry, but you're an excellent lecturer, and I learned a lot. I wondered if these discussions within the UN that was initiated mostly by Muslims, are they in a way, can they in a way help, for example, Baha'is or other people around the world who are being offended and by Muslims? To you, these discussions and deliberations and the new tools that are being established to press them to change their attitude and behavior, for example, with regard to the Baha'is in Iran. Is this being done?
Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, it hasn't been enshrined in law yet. It's infiltrating and affecting a wide range of instruments and procedures in the UN today. It's not yet enshrined in law. The intention is that it be enshrined in law. Certainly, even if there was an optional protocol to the Convention for Elimination of Racial Discrimination on defamation of religions, then you're leaving it up to an expert body of independent, hopefully largely independent experts to adjudicate on the matter. Therefore, if the OIC thinks it's going to then manipulate in a unidimensional manner all the decision making of that body, I think they'll be surprised by the outcome. Baha'is are not encouraging the defamation of religions debate, but what I was suggesting is that likely there is no good faith, but let's assume there is good faith and open the discussion up to illustrating victims around the world, a multiplicity of victims around the world. Whether Baha'is can then use the resulting legislation to defend themselves, possibly, if it doesn't have the term divine religions as interpreted by particular OIC states as the limitation grounds. Now, I'm hopeful that the UN cannot pass into law an instrument that will be open to such crude legislation, limitation. Otherwise, many others would be.
Is there a definition of divine?
No.
Divine?
In the UN, it always talks about religion.
Divine. Buddha was. In a way.
Well, divine by self-definition is fine. I mean, a humanist can claim that, not divine, but that it is so integral to their conscience that it's equivalent to being divine. So if it's open to interpretation, then, even that language can be overcome. But it depends who's in charge and what are the limitations. The Egyptian Supreme Administrative Court in December 2006 decided that not only divine religions, but religion or belief as enshrined and protected in UN human rights instruments only means Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So if that's the interpretation, we have a problem. And they said not only is that the definition of religion or belief in the Egyptian constitution, but that is the definition that the UN has always intended. And you think, what? So, all this debate that we have had again and again in academia, in the UN, about what is religion, what is divine, Professor Lerner, the answer is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism.
Well, I don't know. I am, in that respect, I'm also more extremist than you. I say that it is in general not necessary to build a question of defamation of religions. And my argument is the following one. The legislation against religious intolerance, which deals with religions as well as with non-religious groups but which are related in some way to religion groups, beliefs which are not theologically religious, can find enough protection in the existing documents. And I will mention particularly three of them. First of all, the Convention Against Genocide speaks about the three things. The Covenants on Human Rights, the Covenant of 1966, Article 19 and Article 20, that have to be coordinated, speaks about the three things. Everything. It's only the Racial Convention that speaks only about race and not about religion. But the reason for that is historical. At the beginning, there was supposed to be one single document on race and religion. And then, with the support of the Muslim delegation, they stopped it. And with the support of the African delegations, they had very soon a convention on racial discrimination. And nothing happened with regard to religious intolerance until 1981, when only a declaration was adopted and not the binding instrument. So, my argumentation, I believe, I don't know if Nazila will agree with that. I say that analogical hermeneutics, legal analogical hermeneutics, permits to to be based on Article 4 of the Racial Convention, also to apply it to religious discrimination and intolerance. They were both born together. They were only separated by political influences by some occasional results. And for that reason, we don't have a treaty on religious intolerance. We have only a treaty on racial discrimination and not on religious discrimination. And I don't know we will have it in any time, at least in my life, because there is a draft which is pending at the United Nations and which is based on the 1981 declaration in order to become a binding instrument with some small differences. But I don't see any activities in that respect. I believe even very outspoken human rights people are not fighting for having a convention, because I know it is difficult, and because also for another reason, which is a positive reason. The Declaration on Religious Intolerance of 1981, a difference of most declarations adopted by the United Nations, has a mechanism of implementation. There is a special rapporteur which is entitled to produce every year a report. He's entitled to visit countries, he's entitled to ask for annual reports and to enlarge those reports. It can be implemented. So there is no need for additional international legislation.
I agree. I was just going along with your suggestion that, let's say it's inevitable, could it benefit others? And, so therefore it could if it was widely enough defined. But yes, I don't think we need it. I think, the fact that anti-Semitism is on the increase, attacks on Muslims, maybe on the increase in particular countries, etc., is because of lack of political will to implement it. It's not because of a lack of international human rights instruments. Yes, perhaps there's more legislation required at the national level. Certainly there is more implementation required at the local level. But it's not the lack of international human rights instruments that's, it's left wanting.
Always the same thing.
I think we...
Last question. Please, when you say Baha'is writing, is it all in the Baha'u'llah's writing himself, or is it like in the Jewish culture you have Talmud and you have question and answer with sages?
No, she said Baha'u'llah.
The writings that, for example, Baha'is read at a devotional part of their meeting would come from the Bab Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha. So the forerunner, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the religion, and Abdul Baha, his son, the authorized interpreter.
And your book stops in 2002. Your book stops in 2002.
This book, yes, this book, yes. Yes, that's nothing to do with Baha'u'llah.
I said two questions.
Sorry, yes.
Have you continued? I mean, is there a continuation of this? What happened after?
Yes, this was my PhD that I converted into a book in 2002. Unfortunately, in fact, the situation of Baha'is has escalated very sharply since 2003.
I must make a
remark. There is a lot. There's
other volumes to be written.
I must make a remark.
Maybe I should do an update, absolutely.
I must make a remark. Dr. Ghanea is one of the editors of a book which, to my mind, has the most successful and most intelligent title.
Which I
It
didn't
is called,
write.
She didn't write it, but she did the etiquette. It is a book which is called "Does God Believe in Human Rights?" That's a question mark. And then the person who wrote the introduction, who is a British scholar, finishes his introduction with the following words: "Does God believe in human rights? Only God knows." I believe it was very successful.
A good note on which to end.
I wish to thank both participants and the audience for a great lecture and great remarks of the discussants. I think we, with such steadfast protectors of human rights, we can be optimistic regarding the future. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And I hope you will come again and bring the rain this time.
No, well, I have nothing.
This time
against,
is not
I
come.
have nothing against the rain. I am coming to driving under the rain.
Thank you.
When are you leaving, Nazila?
On the 10th. Next week.
So why don't you come to Tel Aviv?
Yeah, why don't I come on the 10th? What are you doing on the 10th? Is it a good day or a bad day?